Hey everyone, I want to thank you for giving us the opportunity to come in and meet with you today and really tell you a little bit about what we're doing here at Cohesity. My name is Shane Brandy, and I've been in the data protection industry for over a decade now. So I've really seen the impact of legacy solutions on organizations like yours and how they really need to be modernized. So I want to take you through what we're doing here at Cohesity and how we're unique in the way we're solving these problems. So let me give you a little context on what we do, and we'll dive into the details here. And if you think about it, most of you probably heard of Cohesity and thought of us as your basic backup and recovery solution. And backup and recovery has existed within silos for literally decades now. But all those rest of things around actually like bringing the level of protecting your data require things like disaster recovery, business continuity, and what we've done simplistically at Cohesity is really consolidated or converge those things into a single solution. And what that means for you is in the end, you'll have a solution that helps you lower cost because you consolidate it across those silos. You'll get to improved recovery times, which are really critical to achieving resilience for your business and ultimately improve your posture when it comes to data security. And we'll go through each of these along the way. Now, you're in great company. We've prided ourselves in catering to the largest enterprises in the world. So you'll see amongst the Fortune 100 and federal agencies, the global financial services, the U.S. banks, so on and so forth. We're actually in 5 of the 10 largest U.S. banks. We have 200 three-letter agency accounts. So we're in the biggest and baddest enterprises in the land. And we're there because we're really built, we built a solution as a scalable web architecture. And we'll go into more detail about that. But we're really focused on the customer. So we want to understand what your needs are, what your use cases are, and what challenges are then how we work to come up with a solution for you. So this is more of your marketing slide, right? But the point of this slide is to show you that we've been recognized by some of the leading analyst firms. Um, and it's really against the competitive landscape. And you guys know, as users of that more legacy product, that there's some lacking innovation there. And I think the biggest point here is you see, all those quotes, it's really around innovation. And we continually strive and driving that innovation agenda. And in fact, if we get the opportunity to work a little closer, we'd love to show you some of our recent innovations that have come to fruition. Now let's take a step back and talk a little bit about the context on the problem space you and your organization have dealt with. I'm sure for many, many years, which is the data has been traditionally isolated. It's kept in particular systems, within silos, within different departments, within your organization. But when you move to the public cloud, and with many organizations across the globes having data that is distributed, you ended up with a very hybrid type environment, right? And the challenge that creates is now you have a bunch of complexities that are associated with how you keep costs under, like how do you keep costs under control? Because each one of those different environments has its own architecture, its own complexities. How do you secure an Azure environment versus your private cloud environment that may be running on vSphere, right? Those are things that you end up with. And many teams, they need to have many competencies that have to be formed in different tool chains to actually be able to support all that. So it gets costly real quick. And then what's vastly important these days, and I'm not telling you anything you don't know, right, is how do you actually secure the data? And we're going to spend a bunch of time talking about that because there isn't a day that goes by that there isn't a ransomware attack. Very unfortunate, but it's the world we live in, right? And we know it's just not a matter of if, it's when that happens. How do you ensure that your data itself is actually recoverable? How do you have the forensics around that to be able to identify where that clean data is? And that's what we're going to spend a bunch of time talking about. And that's what we mean when we say data security. So the second we're going to talk about is, really legacy backups was built in an era where tape was the primary medium. And unfortunately, that doesn't cut it today, right? Your organization tasks you with specific SLAs, and being able to manage across different platforms and different workloads, and mainframe to Microsoft 365. All of those things require different solutions, and really ultimately bring you a suboptimal solution. Now, I'm not going to sit there and belabor how attacks actually happen, right? You guys have a SOC yourself, so we're not going to go there and bore you with that. But in the end, those attackers are after the data itself. And that means they're going to try to encrypt the data and hold it at ransom, ultimately extorting you. They're going to wipe the data out, where they're literally just going to destroy it, or they're going to corrupt just parts of it. But all those things now require not just your security team, but your IT team and security teams coming together to actually really to make the data resilient to start with. And in the case where that does actually happen, how do you recover it and ultimately not pay the ransom? Because every statistic out there shows that if you pay the ransom, you're not guaranteed to get the data back. You may not even get the encryption keys. They may give you some of them, and they may not work, and you're likely to get targeted again. So ultimately, you don't want to be in that situation where you're actually having to pay. So at Cohesive, we've taken a focused approach here to looking at this through the lens of an ecosystem. And what we mean by that is, if you look at the cybersecurity strategies that have existed for a long time now, there's what's called the defense index strategy. It's basically a preventative approach where you create firewalls and endpoint detections, really just to try to stop the back actors from getting in. And that's really not sufficient anymore. If you look at it through the lens of data, all of those aforementioned strategies are basically there to protect the systems. And it's the systems that have access to the data, but it's not really protecting the data itself. So when you think about it through those lenses of those things that are still very important and necessary, but you also need to protect the data itself, right? Because ultimately, that's what the people are after. So there's a better way to do that. There's a smarter way to do that. And so we do three things very simplistically. The first is we protect the data. This is how do you ensure that before there's an attack, that you have the utmost level of availability of your data and the resilience of it. That means things like keeping multiple copies of your data, having some of it off-site locations, ensuring the data itself is tamper resistant. That is what we call immutability, right? And then putting all the controls around it when it comes to access and management using the principles of zero trust. Then the next is, how do you detect that an attack may be going on or may have happened? That means having monitoring detection capabilities to actually be able to identify where the malware was inserted into your environment. If it still exists, right, within the data, before you're going to recover it, and understanding where there may be sensitive data, because in your case specifically, if you have a breach, you need to report it. Especially if there's sensitive customer data that has been exposed as part of it. So being able to do that for forensic analysis through a data perspective, together with insights that your security team will bring. That is the power of bringing these worlds together. But in the end, you can't be resilient unless you can actually recover the data. And that means having the flexibility to recover either on mass scale, which we can do uniquely in an instantly available fashion. So opposed to your traditional backup systems where you're going through a process that looks like restoring from tape, which we all know can take eons, to, in our world, being able to instantly mount that data so you can start that forensic analysis process by identifying how you're going to recover it, or doing a surgical fine-grained recovery when you know specific data sets that you want to pull back. to bring really your most critical operations back online, as an example. So those are really the three core areas that we focus on. And in subsequent conversations, we'd love to take you through this and really show you a demo and maybe bring in your broader team to provide them a demo of this. So we're not really approaching this problem like we are a security company. Yes, we are focused on data security and data management, but we're working as part of a broader ecosystem, knowing full well that you have a whole slew of different security tools. You have a SOC, right? You have an operations center, a security operations center that manages all these things, right? You have playbooks, you have table text exercises, so on and so forth, right? So we're working together with a variety of different solutions out there to integrate with what they have, and we've done this through an alliance. So when I mentioned the alliance, we formed one with some of the biggest players out there, and you may ask yourself, why would these players like Palo Alto Networks and Tenable and the other folks there be so interested in working with us and forming this alliance? Well, it's because they realize we can provide better insights to ultimately secure their customers and be able to get them back up operational by actually bringing the insights from the data together with the endpoint data, right? I mean, pretty simple. That's an example of many of the types of things that we're doing with all these partners out there. And to give you one specific example, you think about recovering your data in the case of attack. How do you ensure that that data is clean before you, bringing it back into your environment? How do you know you're not reintroducing the vulnerability or some malware that existed? By having these tight integrations with folks like Tenable, we can do vulnerability scans, right? And being able to do malware scans with folks like Qualys is another core part of what we do. Now, most important to you these days, especially, is probably getting budget going forward is going to be harder and harder. So being able to get all the benefits of improving your resilience against cyber attacks, and the other needs to come also with the basis of how you're going to improve your bottom line. And so what we typically see in organizations of your scale is that by moving from those legacy infrastructures that we spoke about to that, really shifting the paradigm that was built for 20 years ago and moving that into a converged solution, those organizations typically see about 50% or even greater reduction in their TCO. Now, this is a general number across our customers. It could be much higher than that for you. And we get the opportunity to work with you and understand your environment a little bit more and really your applications and your workloads. We can put together a very specific TCO analysis for you. Now, I'm sure this all sounds fantastic to you, right? But at the same time, it could also be a little bit too much to bite off it all in one chunk, right? There's a lot of capabilities out there, and I don't want you to get the impression that we're really the Swiss Army knife that just can come in and you tell us what you need and we can deliver. Right? A lot of times in the vast majority of our customer base, we target one specific workload. Let's say you're moving to AWS and you're looking for ways to protect that. We can do that, right? We can do it all under the same GUI as if you were to have it on-prem. So there's a lot of layers here, but that's the beauty of our solution, right? We can cover you from the on-premise to cloud to O365 and all in between. So how we do that is actually pretty simple. It's your choice. You decide where you want to store your data. You want to store the data on your on-premise in your own data centers, in your virtual private cloud. If you want to store it in Azure, you want to store it in AWS. Let's say you really want to store it in a fully managed SaaS solution. We can support all of those. But we do that with a very consistent set of services. So everything we talked about is delivered through our data cloud platform. And more importantly, you can access that in a centralized way through one management interface. I know I mentioned that before, but it's super important, whether that's an API or just a user interface. That means your centralized teams who are managing things like governance and policy can set it that way in one way to monitor. It does that across the entire landscape, regardless where the data actually lives. So it's really very much meet you where you are today and help you where you want to get to in the future. So we've got a lot of great case studies out there to share with you, but one of my favorites that I wanted to share with you because it speaks to everything we've talked about in this presentation. They didn't buy us for cyber ransomware protection or cyber recovery. They bought us to modernize their legacy backup infrastructure and Commvault in their case. But as it turned out, they were hit with a cyber attack. And in that cyber instance, they were able to recover their data. And you can see almost instantly. And in the end, it was not the reason why they bought Cohesity, but it's certainly the reason why they continue to grow with us, in addition to the cost savings they've got. So we'd love the opportunity to meet with more of your teams. Like I said before, we can do a more detailed cost analysis for you to show you the benefits of consolidating some of your more legacy or siloed infrastructures by using Cohesity. We'd love to talk to your security teams as well, because I'm sure it's top of mind for all of them is achieving things like cyber resilience and going beyond a defense in-depth strategy, right? So we welcome the opportunity to talk with them about how we can integrate with some of the tools that you maybe already are already leveraging, and bring that data insights, bring those data insights into that. So thank you very much for making time for us today, and happy to take any of your questions. Thank you.